Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast. We make the stories, you buy them from a Barnes & Noble near you. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we're here to tell you a story. New story, new day. What do you guys think? What story elements do you guys have? How are you doing?
I have something based on a book I'm reading.
Perfect.
I have government type.
And I have prophecy. So who should go first? It's all kind of world building stuff. So I'd say Reed should go first because his is the most abstract.
Yeah, I could introduce it, but I'll introduce it. But I'm not. I have some ideas, but I want to wait and see how it flows. But I'm going to introduce the thing that I. Okay.
Let's hear it.
Okay. The book that I just finished actually is Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future.
Shocker.
By Father Seraphim Rose. So when I'm taking a quote by Bishop Ignatius, and this is just a great quote from this book. We are all in deception. The knowledge of this is the greatest preventative against deception. It is the greatest deception of all to acknowledge oneself to be free of deception.
Ooh.
Isn't that cool?
That's very cool.
Yeah. So I have a feeling that this could fit into a number of storylines.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to fit really well with the prophecy.
Okay, so do you want me to bring in the government type, or do you want to do the prophecy?
Let's hear the government type, because I feel like the prophecy will bend off of the government type really well.
Okay, so in some different things, I've been reading about some of the different Protestant history, and this isn't to offend any Protestants out there, but in some of the Anabaptist sects that started up. And I'm not trying to single them out. It's just a concept of a lot of different sects or cults that start up.
Right.
But kind of the particular one that had come across recently had to do with some of the Anabaptists, where there was kind of over the course of, I think it was like towards the end of the Middle Ages to the Renaissance era time frame.
Yeah.
And you had this group kind of come forth, and I think it was somewhere in the Netherlands, Dutch or something, I think. And I think they did the same thing, kind of John Huss with like the Hussite Wars. There was kind of a group that did this too, I think in the Czech Republic. And so it's not like just one particular thing, but it's like this thing where, a certain sect starts kind of pulling away, and they kind of heighten more of like a messianic figure of their midst, and then try to pull away and make the New Jerusalem and the kingdom of God on earth, but it's very filtered through, kind of their messianic figure, who then kind of sets himself up, and sometimes not, let's say, as a Christ, but as, now that this is the new era, I'm Christ's new prophet, and this is the cool way that God's kingdom is going to come. So you're going to give up all your money. You're going to move into this city. I'm going to set up a special council that decides whether, you're in line with, the true kingdom of God,
that's one of the
mostly giving up, all of your money and your land to the collective. And it was
that's one of the things that like Zwingli really emphasized, was like the connection between the state and the church. And so it's kind of funny that the Anabaptists split from Zwingli, but they kept that kind of emphasis on like state power. Sorry.
And and so and weirdly enough, like this one particular one, and again I think it was in the Netherlands, because I think it was Dutch.
Switzerland.
But was it Switzerland?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I know that's where some of it was. I can't remember like which town it was, but basically, so it's like you have this, either it's the whole like kind of thing in general, but it's that, the ruler that is set up, and it was like a precursor to what we would see as communism today, where it was, it's brotherly love to not own anything, and it's the collective and all things in common, right? But then ultimately, as that starts moving forward, the charismatic leader seems to be the one that has all the money and all the women and all the, whatever it is. And there becomes a smaller and smaller group that's more fanatically loyal to that charismatic leader that then inquisitize most everybody else to make sure they're not holding off on any, money they haven't, given to the collective, or, make fun of the leader. I know there was one thing, I think Calvin had someone jailed because they made like a little nursery rhyme making fun of him. But anyways,
I didn't never know that.
We're not writing a story in the midst of the Reformation, are we?
No. I'm just saying it's just that concept.
Oh,
so the government type that you have set up is kind of this, this fervor of the people, at least on the surface, that are, wrapped up in this kind of moving on to this new age, kind of a wouldn't say quite dystopian movement. Like we think of dystopian, but it's like, this new way, the more revealed way, and we've got to give up, kind of our possessions, and it's the collective, but it's as the leader deems fit for our need, and and so that kind of figure that comes and really kind of acts like that father figure, but it's kind of not quite dystopian, but more wrapped up in more of like pinning like a messianic hope on a new figure that's arising and kind of
right
reorganizing society, that if that makes sense,
which results in like an authoritarian centralized power structure.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of fanatical as well. These aren't they're maybe they consider themselves kind of rationalists, but the whole thing, if it's based around a centralized figure, then it starts to move into sort of fanaticism, right? Mm-hmm. Technically?
Yeah, technically, where, kind of on the surface, it's, a very, I guess, religious, movement of idea, whereas like the communist revolution was very removing an idea, an atheistic, removing of God for this kind of communal thing, where it's still kind of said, give up everything you have, and then the state will distribute to those who need. And then but in this case, it was, you're not living holy enough unless you, give up all your food. Oh, you have bread that we didn't redistribute to those who needed it, drawn and quartered, because that's what was happening.
Right. I mean, that sort of thing we also saw during like the French Revolution as well.
Oh, right. And that's kind of the direction that was kind of showing that same idea was wrapped up with where, the age of the revolutions came up with that same thing, but just from a more deistic or atheistic perspective by, the time the French Revolution and then the other ones of that time came about. But
well, guys, this is really strange, I'll say, because it seems like we were all thinking of the same thing. And that makes sense. We talk like every week about stories and what we like about them, and we share books with each other, and we talk because do you know what the prophecy is? Secret knowledge.
Ooh.
So it's all based around secret knowledge. And I don't know if you guys have ever had secret knowledge, but secret knowledge is one of the most dangerous things that you can possess. I was talking to a friend of mine who had some secret knowledge, and then it kind of got out that he had secret knowledge, but he didn't want to tell the people what the secret knowledge was. And so instead, he ended up sort of looking like a person who had his nose in the air and thought that he was better than everyone else. At the end of the day, he didn't feel that way. But because he didn't feel right sharing the secret knowledge, it ended up casting him in a light that he didn't like. And that's very difficult. So this secret knowledge is the means by which the people in the upper echelons of the government are controlling the masses. It's the instructions. And these things come in at like a snail's pace, the knowledge does. But the way that they acquire the knowledge, the way that they acquire it comes into the snail's pace, and it's not like a prophecy. It doesn't give them like 10 years into the future. It like provides them with 2 to 3 days, sometimes up to a week of information on the people that they're trying to oppress and information on how to sort of support this false system they're creating. But they can't, my thought is that somehow they're channeling energy, you know, maybe they're like, have like ley lines and they're at a place where they're like getting information from the future or something. I don't know. But the idea is that they're getting just a little bit of it at a time. But the way that they're acquiring it is that my thought is that they're kind of like, if you had a 1% chance to like, you know, be able to see the future, and you took everyone who had a 1% chance and you segregated them from everyone else and put them all together, 100 of them, you'd have 100% chance to see the future at all times. But what do you do to society when you remove all of these extra sort of savants, and maybe they're mathematicians, maybe they're geniuses? You sort of do a great disservice to society as a whole by removing these, like, imagine if we found out that what's his name, Van Gogh, like the way he painted, he could like predict the stock market, right? And he was still alive. Immediately all the Van Goghs would be gone from the world, and Van Gogh himself would be in seclusion and no one would ever be exposed to him, and therefore we would never have what I consider to be one of the best painters that have ever existed. No one would know about him. That is what they've done. They've taken these people or these things and they've secluded them, and they basically farm secret knowledge. And this is one of the things they're using to kind of fund and prop up this regime as it's kind of unfolding.
And they just let out little dribs and drabs of information and instructions just to keep the machine rolling, but with promises of future disclosures that never really quite meet up with the expectation, but it gets just enough of a tease to keep everybody sucked in.
Yeah, like I have this picture as you were talking, Reed, enough of a tease. My thought was that like maybe there's like a color, like a specific color that activates people's like creative gene or their creative brain. My brain said it was like a red. And obviously the upper echelons of the government, their entire rooms are painted red because they are like, they're in on it, you know, they know the things. So they're like, but the office worker or the secretary, he can sometimes, if he looks down the hallway as all the doors are opening and closing, sometimes he just gets a glimpse of the red room down the hallway.
Yeah.
And it like, his brain just like, whoo, you know, it's like lights up. But other than that, it's been stripped from the world. Red wouldn't work because blood is red, and it, you know, you can't remove people's blood. But you could do something, you could be like something like purple, right? Which is really difficult to occur naturally, you know. Yellow is another one that you could do, which then you could counterplay that with the fact that the hero or someone who's going to come and save people like brings dandelions down from the mountains or something, you know.
I was thinking, starry, starry night, paint your palette blue and gold.
Yeah. So that's the prophecy. It's not a prophecy as much, but it's kind of a prophecy. It's kind of, you know, my idea is that these people in this government that Seth is talking about, they talk about the fact that the new word is unfolding as we speak. We are discovering the new word, you know, and that's because they're able to sort of farm, they found a way to distill and farm being like a cruel term, like factory farm, inspiration, factory farm, the ability to see the future or to, you know, have some great piece of wisdom. What do you think, Seth? Did I ruin your idea?
No, I think it plays out well. I like the idea of something like that as a prophecy instead of being I know, like, it's always hard to come up with prophecy. I know when I have it, because you're like, okay, like, you're kind of like, the one that finds the great sword and can,
Yeah.
on like the last, sunny day of autumn, like, okay, what's that supposed to mean? And you're like, I came up with a bunch of gibberish. I hope this works.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I can't help but think how my line from the book fits in. It is the greatest deception to acknowledge oneself to be free of deception.
Right.
Ooh.
Right. So we kind of we have like the dressing that, like the clothes that the world is wearing, but we don't have, like, how would we explain to somebody the government type if this was a single novel? You know what I mean? It's like,
I don't know. Like, the thing that comes to mind would be like a messianic theocracy, but that I don't know if that.
Well, I'm sorry. I don't mean explain it the government type. What I mean is how if we were making an alternative history right now, we could rely on literally hundreds of years and hundreds of different civilizations as ways to justify why people believe the way they do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, how do we present the world in a cohesive way so that we can get across a messianic theocracy?
What popped into my mind just as you were talking was 1984, where they just constantly rewrite history, and any actual historical reference that does not fit the current narrative is just flushed down the memory hole, and it's just literally rewritten. With this secret knowledge, the elites control what it all looks like.
So I think of like a few different things where maybe this isn't the whole world, and maybe this is either just like a certain like city state, or like one kind of smaller country, or a larger country at this point that has been kind of moving where I don't know, as far as either this is like an alternate history thing where we're, let's say, inserting our own sect that kind of emerges somewhere in the Middle Ages as an alternate history kind of thing, or if it's more of a fantasy realm. But you would have something where you have I know, like Islam comes out 600 years later and goes, oh well, they didn't quite have the full understanding, right? That new secret knowledge, right? Same thing with like Mormonism, comes up with, oh, we found these new bits that they've never had before, or like extra revelation. And thinking about deception, especially if there's an amount of what's the thing? 'Cause like so many people are doing it today, that deconstruction. Where it's like there's enough, like, let's say, dissatisfaction with either parts of corruption or part of whatever someone's seen in a base structure, societal structure, belief system, and then they break it down, and then in the desire to need to have something else, right? A lot of times then they'll build back in and going, oh well, if there was more to this, or get kind of builds back up, or more susceptible to newer knowledge, something that those older people just wouldn't have known this, right? And so perhaps this country over the last 100 years slowly kind of started out where just kind of breaking the people down to slowly kind of break away from the norm and adopt more of this other idea, to where now you have I was thinking when you were talking the prophecy thing, is it like, would it really be a true like seeing the future, or would it be like a chess thing, right? So if you play chess, you have to think or plan 3 moves ahead or more,
if
right?
you want to win.
If you want to win. And so
I don't want to win, so I don't do that.
And so sometimes, let's say, using chess as an example, you could very highly predict the moves that someone else would make, because you've already planned and you've moved these other 3 pieces, and the last 5 turns you've been planning this thing to make these other things happen. And so then when you predict a future movement, it could look like prophetic, Because if you're already hedging the bets or hedging all the outcomes.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Here's kind of what I'm thinking. I think that I could make a setting that we could accomplish a lot of the things that we're trying to do inside of it. So here it is. There once was there was the world, right? And the world had, of course, their varying different opinions on how people should act and how things should go, right? This is just culturally, people are different. That's just how it is. At some point in time, near the border of one of the countries, these two countries were sort of in conflict with each other. There was a slave or a conscripted guy, right? Maybe he was a criminal, history, it's lost to time what his actual life was, but he basically was able to inspire through a spark. Maybe this is the magic system, I don't know. Maybe just he had really good charisma. He was basically able to inspire a kind of slave uprising, right? But not just inspire a slave uprising, but he was able to sort of do that, and he won the hand of the princess. She fell in love with him. This was 100 years ago, whatever. Now, what happened was when he was doing this, there was a war, right? And at first it was a very bloody war because it was a bunch of slaves, ex-slaves, and then lower class people who began to sort of latch on to his message of equality, of representation, of all of these things, right? These things that we hold so dear, that are so important, individual representation, the terrible working conditions, right? And it was a war. Basically, it expanded from this one country on the border into this other country, and then these two other countries were telling each other, hey, get all your peasants in line because they're starting to destroy our stuff. And then they started to fight, and it was this just kind of gross thing. And pretty soon soldiers were peeling off. First it was the lowest class soldier who basically felt like a peasant himself. He got paid a little bit more, so he started to peel off and join this army, and it just kind of started working its way up. And then finally, a big general moved over, and what happened is this new country basically got formed by the fact that anyone who fought against them would be inspired to move over, right? And so this kind of figurehead held, maybe he was the first person to manifest this power of inspiration, right? Of truth wielding, right? He could see a truth in a thing, but more than anything else is he could communicate it and sort of actively convince people. And what we have now is a country that is now 50, 100 years after that is trying to, at the beginning, they were we're going to have equal representation. We're going to have decent working hours. They promised all the things that he spoke about, but through the years, he has been sort of turned into this Messiah figure. And instead of a system of government revolving around the fair representation of the individual, instead his words are treated like scriptures. And he once called out an officer for keeping an extra saddle, because even though his other fellow officers had saddles that were really worn down, and he called them out and said, can't you see you're being you're tried to help him understand that his other officers his other officer over here has a saddle that's broken. Like, why not give him? And that turned into, it's selfish to have more than one of something you need right now. You know, where he was just trying to convince this officer to like help his fellow officer, but his words were codified and solidified, and he wasn't a divine person. And so now it's twisted, right? And what happened was what people realized is that this guy had this strange ability, and so what they've done is now they go around the world finding people who manifest this ability and taking them in and cutting them off so that they can have the secret knowledge, the foresight, the whatever this guy was manifesting, the power to see into a situation, the power to convince people with his words, all these things. They strip potential from the world so that they can like continue to try and manifest a power, but they also remove this country's ability to fight against the sort of terrible system that they've created, right?
It sounds like Mao's Cultural Revolution a little bit.
Except for the fact that I think Mao knew what was going on. And I would say that like at the place, this guy is not like advocating for this.
Right.
It's the person writing down everything he says, and then the people bickering about what he said. And then so this guy wasn't a messiah. He was just manifesting this power, and he was able to win so many people their freedom. But now he's gone, and the people who are left in charge are trying desperately to sort of hold on to and frankly take out of context all of the things that he said and all the things that he tried to communicate. And so you have this kind of new country in the middle, and you have these two countries on the side, and one could be like really authoritarian, and one could be like a little, in one he's a dictator, and in the other one he's a king, and technically he's a dictator, but he like listens to his people. And it's like, these two like kind of varying views, and in the middle is this country trying to establish itself. What do you guys think about that?
I like it.
It sounds horrible, but very interesting. I mean, like, a lot of good stories are about horrible things.
Yeah. This is what I meant when I said, how do we, like, what world do we create? How do we justify the government type and the prophecy and the something based on a book you're reading in our story? I think that will do it, because you have a lot of unrest. You have a lot of opportunity for influence from these other countries, because this country like defeated them, both of them. And the only reason why it didn't continue to grow was because maybe this Messiah figure died or left, or something happened to him, and we don't know. But now enough time has passed that red tape and bureaucracy have begun to sort of gum up the works, and things are at this kind of stalling point. I would say there's like maybe a couple, like 3 of this Messiah figure's kind of sidekicks, or think about like his adventuring party. There's like 3 of them left, and they kind of took over the reins. They're old and they kind of took over the reins of running the country. One's in charge of the military, one's in charge of one's like kind of like the leader of the religion, and one's kind of like the administrator, and they're like these older people, and everyone who's underneath them like looks up to them because they fought tooth and nail with the victor, or whatever his name is. But
Spartacus.
Yeah, my brain thought of John Farson from the Dark Tower series, the good man.
The good man, yeah.
Yeah. But he's no longer around, and so people kind of look up to them, but they're like old, and I keep saying old like that's a bad thing, but like mean and selfish, and people are like, what's going on? Like I thought you know? So there's like these whispers of like, I thought it was supposed to be beautiful, and I thought it was like the golden age before. And, you know, where did it go wrong is the question.
So here's a thought with like the old people. Reed brought up 1984. It's been longer. Those three people are not the original people that would have been with him. It's really been like maybe several hundred years.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But they keep like changing an idea, and after a while, perhaps it's what these people started, but it's like part of that, maybe the secret knowledge thing is that it's like these figures have to stay. If something directly connected to the central figure goes away, you know, they'll lose kind of that power. And so over the course of what would seem to be a lifetime, they adjust an idea to keep the public's mind that they've just done this. You know, the Messiah figure had just died only those short few years ago, and we're the ones who are still holding on, and, you know, and yet it's like someone that's in the know kind of takes the place. And so long as, you know, they look kind of the same, perhaps they use cosmetics.
Right.
But just with their propaganda, keep this idea kind of like in 1984. Is it 1984? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's only been a year. Maybe it's been 30 years. Maybe it's been 100. Who knows, right? I don't know. I just thought of that as a... to bring back to Reed's thing, too, with the whole deception. And if that was just the introduction, I'd like to hear, like, the rest of, you know, what all is coming from the... if that was it, or if he's got more from, you know, based on the book. But anyways, that was my bit of inspiration of kind of what's going on.
My thought is also that these other countries, this country is a bit like North Korea, right? Imagine being in North Korea and like legitimately believing that you were the most successful and best country around. Yeah. And it's not until you go to a different country that you realize, oh, eating crickets, eating bugs and grass is not, in fact, the best. You know, I'm not saying that the people there are ignorant to the fact that their lives are pretty terrible, but this idea of like these other countries, they're afraid of this centralized country because of something that happened a long time ago, and they're not sure how it will, they're not sure what they'll do, you know, maybe because this country has like the people are like fanatically devoted. So they will like run one after another off a cliff if told that that's the best thing that can happen. You know, the military is just like incredibly brainwashed. And so these other countries kind of deal with this one, but they kind of deal with it like a sick child. Like, how do we like talk to you guys without like contracting any of what you have?
Yeah, it's like a plague.
Right.
A brain rot plague.
Right.
I could see how they'd have like a demilitarized zone like around this country, and so it's been pretty isolated, which then doesn't help that country always keep up an idea like they're under a constant siege that's still going on, that they have to be strong and endure this siege, you know, and yet it's just like a demilitarized zone. But on their side of it, they're like, you know, always under the siege, and it's just, you know, the siege just started like yesterday,
like,
and yet, you know, it's been many generations. And
like the tribes like in the Amazon or in like in Borneo or in like New Guinea, you know, they would have, you know, like X mark, you know, warning signs at the borders of their territory with like skulls or shrunken heads or something, you know, affixed to them, and like stay out.
Right. Exactly. Well, this is good. I think this is there's a lot of places we can go with this. We can have heroes coming from the other countries. We can have things happening within the country. I think this is a great start. Anything else you guys want to add before we wrap it up like a burrito?
I think put some of that enchilada sauce that you made the other day.
Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better, the Improvisational Storytelling Podcast. If you like this episode, if you found it interesting, informative, or entertaining, let us know. Send us a message at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com or message us on Twitter at @getsbettercast. We are always happy to hear your constructive criticism, your creative ideas, and your comments and curiosities. Lots of C's today. And until next time, just wait, because it gets better.